So the knight f6 is something that we have to look at as well, because it is played very often. So this would, it's, like I said, it's a little bit more complicated, I suppose, but it is worth taking a look at. So d4, knight takes d5, knight f3, g6, perhaps c4, knight b6. It almost reminds a little bit of the other kind of defense. Knight c3, bishop g7, h3. Castles, bishop e3, knight c6, bishop e2, e5, d5, knight e7. Castles, knight f5, bishop g5, f6, bishop c1, c5, d takes, b takes, e3, queen e7, knight e4, bishop e7, c5, knight e5, queen c2, a5, bishop a3, bishop a6, takes. And this is actually the end of this variation. So let's see what else. If we go back to knight f6, there's also something else, I believe. Bishop e5 actually throws things around a little bit. This is check, so black obviously has to put something in between. He could play c6, but that would just gambit the pawn, even though he could. It's not actually a gambit at this point, because black can or should win it back. But bishop d7 is the most common move, followed by bishop c4, bishop g4 check. Well, not actually check, but bishop g4, f3. Bishop c5, knight c3, and here knight bd7, for example, with the idea to play knight b6 to simply win back the pawn. It's as simple as that. Knight ge2, knight b6, bishop e3. He could even play check one more time, but then just bishop d7, takes, d4, just takes, and black is just fine. There's also g4, knight b6. If check, he doesn't win anything because the bishop simply goes back. So d3, for example, bishop c8, bishop e5, bishop d7, bishop c4. This could be a repetition, but that's not so interesting. g4 is a move, but I'm not so sure if it makes much difference. Like I said, bishop simply goes back, and queen e2 could be played. Just takes, bishop d2, e6. I don't think white is better here. What else? Obviously, f3 is not necessary. You could also play knight f3. But then you just take the pawn, knight c3. You can either take the e6 or c6. h3. Bishop h5, castles, e6. d4, bishop e7, knight e4, knight d7, c3, castles, rook e1. Bishop g6, bishop d3, and this is the end of this line. So what else? I took a very quick look at d4, but again I want to look at bishop e5. I think a lot of players would play this, so I think just go bishop d7. And okay, the bishop could go back to e2 just to stop, the bishop d4 idea. Then just take the pawn, followed by d4, and obviously at some point white wants to play c4, bishop f5, knight f3, e6, castles, bishop e7, a3 or c4. a3, for example. Obviously a3, because if c4 right away, then black could play knight b4 and threaten, this move. So he will probably have to play knight e3. It's not a very nice move that you have to play, so you want to avoid that, even though this is quite playable. But a3 stops that idea. It's as simple as that. Castles, c4, and again there is no knight b4, so the knight has to go to either f6 or b6. Knight c3, bishop f6, bishop e3, knight c6, h3, queen d7. These are all the main moves. Obviously there are many other moves. h6, bishop g6, but queen d7, b4, rook a to d8, rook a2. I suppose rook a2 just steps out of this potential threat. But also prepare something like rook d2 perhaps. Knight takes d4. Knight takes, bishop takes, rook d2, e5, knight b5, queen e7, knight takes, pawn takes, and just bishop takes. You could also play rook takes. If rook takes, for example, then obviously queen takes. You could take with the bishop, but that's probably not a very good idea. So queen takes, rook over here. I don't know, maybe queen c3. Who's to say who's better here? So knight f6, it is playable, obviously, but it's a question of taste. I mean, if you prefer knight f6, then just go for it. But instead of bishop b5 check, there's d4 and knight takes. A lot of players would probably throw in c4 immediately, and the queen. And we already took a look at that. Knight b6, knight f3, g6. g6 simply gives white an option to develop both bishops. One to g7 and the other to f5 or g4 perhaps, depending on. But of course h3 stops this guy from developing. So bishop d7, knight c3, castles, bishop a3, knight c6, bishop e2, e5. e5 is an attempt to open up squares for this bishop, so d5, and we already looked at these moves. I think c4 is just fine. Knight f3 again, but there's also bishop g4 immediately, just to get that bishop out before all those other moves happen. So c5, knight d5 is okay. There's also knight f6, d7, knight b6 to d7, bishop c4, e6, perhaps knight c6 also playable. But then bishop takes, king takes, knight g5, and black is just worse. So for that reason, e6, h3, bishop h5, knight c3, bishop e7, bishop e3, knight c6, queen e2, castles, castles long, bishop g6, h4, bishop h5 again, rook h2, g1 prepares move g4, so bishop g4 before g4, d5. Well, he could go over here, I think. Then what would happen? If he takes over here, takes back. Let's see. Well, that's probably not so good for white. But d5 is actually a move, book move. It looks very tempting to play knight to e5. Maybe the queen can moves, or maybe not. Or maybe he can just play bishop e3. But this gives... well, taking on f3 is probably not such a good idea, because let's say, for example, knight takes, pawn takes, and then bishop h5. Now white has this rook file open. Or this file for the rook, that is. So maybe it's not such a great idea. And after, for example, bishop h5, then this move could happen. If takes, check, and black is lost. So it's probably not such a good idea. But of course he doesn't have to go to h5, he can also go to f5. But again, you know, things could open up like this. Maybe he won't even take. He can also go up over here and have a potential attack on the h7. But he could take. He could also mess up the pawn structure for black by playing c6. And if it takes, well, maybe not so good idea. And also, when this bishop moves somewhere, then well, he could even play this move. This is actually annoying for black. This pawn is weak, so either you can obviously take. We check. You don't want to take back with the pawn, I think. So probably rook take. Well, actually, that would be no. Okay, it's okay because it's check. So let's say rook takes. Well, the black queen is stuck on defending this knight, so he probably has to go to e8. I don't know, maybe how about rook over here, or we could also play rook e1. It looks like white has an attack going. He could also play this knight over here, perhaps. Maybe, you know, over here, attacking this pawn. I don't know. It looks dangerous. So taking this pawn is probably not such a good idea. I mean, the exchange. So I think we all have to go back. So d5 was the last move, I think. Yes. So d5. I'm not so sure what happens after d5. Again, knight e5 looks tempting, but it wasn't so clear as we just saw. So let's see. So knight f6. d4 makes d4 is absolutely the best move, I think, for white. So knight takes. Well, it's not actually necessary to play knight takes d5 immediately. We could even play bishop g4, but this could either lead to moves such as bishop e2, knight f3, or even f3. If f3, you go to f5, and now we could have this line one more time, but this time is a little bit different. So c4, maybe even, yeah, c4. Now it's not so clear how to win back the pawn, so maybe it's better not to play that at all. So you go knight takes d5. c4 is again playable immediately, but knight f3, g6, c4, knight b6. You could go to f6 too, but I think b6 is the most common move here. Knight c3, bishop d7, h3, castles, bishop e3, knight c6. c6 is also a move. How about c5? Is c5? If you take over here, then then black triples those pawns for white by bishop takes, pawn takes, and this looks kind of ugly for white. I don't know. So c5 is actually a playable move here, but there's also knight c6. That's the most common played move. Bishop e2, e5, d5, and again we have these moves that we just basically saw. Castles, knight f5 or f5. Okay, I think I will settle for this. I mean, I could talk for hours about the Scandinavian defense, even though there's not that much theory on the Scandinavian defense as, let's say, in the Sicilian defense or King's Indian defense and those kind of moves or openings actually. So again, if you're new to the Scandinavian defense, I would actually recommend it. It's actually a very interesting opening for black and something I have started playing a little bit more often. It seems like everything goes in phases. Sometimes I play a lot of Sicilian openings, and other times I can try, I don't know. Well, actually, I think Sicilian is my main defense against e4, but d5 will become my maybe not my main weapon, but let's say my secondary weapon, so to speak, against the 1e4. It is interesting, but you also have to be prepared for a lot of complications. But that's the case in every opening, so it doesn't really matter. So I hope you enjoy these 2 clips, part 1 and this part 2, and I will get back about either the Scandinavian Defence or another opening later on.